High above the noisy great hall, a hidden room held the key to a medieval family's private world. This was the solar room, a mysterious chamber found in countless homes from grand manors to simpler dwellings. By the end of this journey, you will understand how a single room reshaped medieval life, power, and our very idea of home. We will uncover why this space was so much more than a bedroom and how its existence created a silent revolution in privacy. What does your own home reveal about the hidden structures of your daily life? The name itself holds a clue, but not the one you might expect. Solar has nothing to do with the sun in this context. It comes from an old French word, solar, which simply meant a loft or an upper room. This linguistic origin points directly to its most fundamental characteristic, its location. The solar was a private chamber, almost always situated on an upper floor, directly above the noisy, public expanse of the Great Hall. Think of it not as a sunroom, but as a sanctuary in the sky. This was the designated retreat for the lord of the house and his immediate family, while the hall below thrummed with the life of the entire household. From servants to visiting strangers, the solar stood in quiet opposition. Its very existence created a physical and symbolic barrier, a clear line drawn between the public duties of the household and the private life of the family. Here, behind a closed door and up a flight of stairs, the constant performance of lordship could finally pause. That great hall was the roaring heart of the entire household, a single room that served as its kitchen, dining room, living room, and often its dormitory. Imagine the scene each night. The lord and lady sat at a raised table, the high table, while the rest of the household, from knights and stewards down to the lowliest kitchen servants, all gathered on benches below. They shared a single meal, warmed by the same massive central fireplace, breathing the same smoky air thick with the scent of roasting meat and fresh rushes strewn across the floor. There was no escaping the noise, the constant movement, or the public nature of every action. Even sleep was a communal affair, with many people simply rolling out bedding on the floor once the tables were cleared. In this world, true privacy was a fantasy. Every conversation could be overheard, every moment of quiet reflection was subject to interruption, and the line between the family's life and the household's operations was blurred beyond recognition. The solar room emerged as a direct and powerful answer to this relentless togetherness. It was the antidote to the hall's chaos, a deliberate retreat built for the simple, revolutionary act of being alone. This evolution from simple loft to formal chamber reveals a quiet architectural revolution. Early solar rooms were often little more than basic wooden platforms, a rudimentary gallery built at one end of the Great Hall. They functioned like a private box seat overlooking the public theater of daily life below. But as the medieval period progressed and construction techniques improved, especially in stone manors, the solar transformed. It became a distinct, well-appointed room, a world away from its humble origins. A separate staircase now led to it, a physical pathway that underscored the growing separation between the lord's private world and the public domain of the hall. Why was this separation so crucial? It signaled a profound shift in how powerful families viewed their own space and status. The placement of this room was never accidental. Builders consistently positioned it on the sunny side of the house, the side that caught the most light and warmth throughout the day. This strategic location gave the room its name, a later association with the sun that stuck, even though its original meaning was far more mundane. Furthermore, the solar was frequently constructed over a stone undercroft. This was a ground-level space used for storage, perhaps for wine, grain, or other valuables. By building their private chamber directly above this functional space, the family was elevated in every sense. They lived literally above the mundane concerns of supply and storage, a physical metaphor for their higher social standing. Their private lives were no longer just adjacent to the household's noise. They were raised above it, secured behind a door at the top of their own stairs. But this architectural separation was more than just a search for quiet. It was a powerful, unspoken statement of wealth and social standing. In a world where most people lived in single-room dwellings, the ability to build an entire extra room, one used for nothing but private family life, was a staggering display of privilege. Constructing a solar required significant resources. It meant quarrying more stone, felling more timber, and employing more skilled laborers. Only the lord of the manor, a wealthy merchant, or a prosperous knight could command such an expense. The very existence of that second-story chamber, with its own staircase and sturdy door, drew a clear and permanent line between the aristocratic family and everyone else under their roof. This was the feudal hierarchy made visible in wood and stone. While the household slept communally in the hall, the lord's family retired to a space that was exclusively theirs. This physical division reinforced the social order every single day, reminding every servant and retainer of their place. The solar was not merely a room, it was a declaration. It announced that this family was so elevated, so removed from the common struggle, that they could afford to waste precious space on something as luxurious as privacy. Can you think of a modern equivalent, a feature in a home that silently communicates status just by its presence? That solar room was the medieval equivalent of a private wing or a dedicated library, a space that served no practical purpose for survival, only for comfort and distinction. Behind that closed door at the top of the stairs lay a realm of intimate authority. This was the lord and lady's personal apartment, a world curated for their comfort and control. Far from the performative politics of the high table, the solar was where they could set aside the heavy mantle of public leadership. Here, they were not just a lord and lady governing a bustling household, but a couple, perhaps even parents, making decisions for their family in a space that felt like their own. The conversations held within these walls were of a different nature entirely. They might discuss confidential matters of estate management, the marriage prospects of a child, or a delicate financial arrangement with a neighboring lord, all shielded from the ever-present ears of the hall. This was the command center for their private life, a sanctuary where their personal authority could be exercised without an audience. The room's very atmosphere fostered a different kind of relationship with their closest companions. Only their most trusted servants, their chaplain, or their immediate family would be admitted. In this more relaxed setting, the rigid formalities of the hall could soften. The lord might play a game of chess with his son, while the lady could embroider or read a religious text, surrounded by her daughters. These were not public displays of piety or leisure, but genuine moments of domestic life. The solar protected a fragile sphere of intimacy, allowing the family to nurture bonds that were entirely separate from their public roles. It was a deliberate cultivation of a private world, a declaration that even the most powerful figures needed a place where they could simply be themselves. The centerpiece of this private chamber was the great bed itself, a fortress of fabric and status. While the household below slept on simple pallets or shared straw mattresses, the lord and lady retired to a bed that was often the single most expensive object they owned. This was not merely a piece of furniture, it was a statement carved in wood and draped in heavy woolens and furs. Curtained off from the rest of the room, this bed created a smaller sanctuary within the sanctuary, a final, intimate retreat from the world. Here, behind those thick hangings, they found a profound quiet impossible in the echoing hall. The curtains did more than block drafts, they muffled every sound, creating a pocket of silence essential for restful sleep. This was a crucial advantage in an era where the night was not always a time of peace, and the ability to sleep securely and deeply was a genuine luxury. Beyond comfort, this space provided vital security. The family's most precious possessions, from locked chests of documents and coin to personal jewelry and fine clothing, were often kept within the solar, safe under their direct watch. The very act of sleeping in a separate, lockable room transformed their nights from a vulnerable public act into a protected private ritual. Can you picture the stark contrast? Downstairs, a body stirring on the floor could wake a dozen others. Upstairs, behind a closed door and within a curtained bed, the lord and lady experienced a solitude that most of their household would never know. This separation of sleeping quarters was a powerful, daily reinforcement of the social order. Where you slept, and with whom, was a direct reflection of your place in the world. The solar's bedchamber was not just about physical comfort, it was about establishing a private life so secure that even one's dreams were their own. Yet this chamber was far more than a private bedchamber. For the lady of the house, the solar was her command center, the very heart of her authority. While the great hall was the stage for her husband's public lordship, this upstairs room was the domain where her power quietly thrived. Here, she held the literal keys to the household's wealth, a heavy ring that unlocked storerooms filled with precious spices, bolts of fine linen, and chests safeguarding the family's legal documents and coin. Her management from the solar was what made the spectacle of the hall below possible. Every meal served, every guest accommodated, every tapestry cleaned and stored, was coordinated under her direct supervision from this quiet space. This was the administrative core of the entire estate, a feminine sphere of influence that was both practical and profound. Can you hear the difference in the sounds? Instead of the boisterous clamor of the hall, the solar was filled with the soft rustle of parchment, the gentle clink of keys, and the low murmur of conversation with her most trusted stewards and servants. It was a space of calculated order, a stark contrast to the chaotic vitality downstairs. In this room, the lady was not merely a noble figurehead, she was a chief executive officer, her authority woven into the very fabric of daily life. She might also retreat here for the more refined aspects of her role, supervising the early education of her younger children or practicing the intricate art of embroidery. These were not just idle hobbies, but essential skills that displayed the family's cultivation and piety. Every stitch in a tapestry, every lesson read from a prayer book, reinforced the social and spiritual standing of the household. The solar, therefore, was a dual sanctuary. It protected the family's private life, and it empowered the woman who managed its most vital operations. This private chamber doubled as the family's fortress and treasury. In a world without secure banks or safety deposit boxes, the solar became a vault, safeguarding the very foundations of their wealth and power. Locked chests lined the walls, their heavy iron fittings guarding the estate's vital records. Inside rested parchment deeds that proved their right to the land, marriage contracts that secured political alliances, and financial agreements that bound tenants to them. These were not just papers, they were the legal lifeblood of the family's status, and their loss could mean ruin. Alongside these documents lay the tangible treasures, the heavy weight of silver coin, the glint of gold jewelry passed down through generations, and bolts of luxurious silk and velvet that represented a fortune in cloth. All of this was consolidated here, in the room where the lord and lady slept. The security was both physical and symbolic. Its position on an upper floor meant any intruder would have to navigate the entire household to reach it. A single, stout door, often the only lockable one in the entire house, could be barred from the inside. This provided a crucial layer of protection not only from outside thieves, but from the very people who shared their home. A medieval household was a crowded, fluid community. Servants came and went, retainers visited with their own entourages, and travelers often sought shelter in the great hall. Trust was essential, but so was prudence. By concentrating their most portable wealth in the solar, the family created a system of control. Access was a privilege granted only to the most loyal stewards or the lady herself, who carried the keys as a badge of her authority. Can you feel the peace of mind that room must have provided? After a long day of public duties, the lord and lady could retire upstairs, bar the door, and rest literally atop their fortune. The rustle of parchment and the chill of metal from those locked chests were constant reminders that this quiet room was the secure heart of their entire world. The solar's locked door did not always mean solitude, for it opened for the most valued of visitors. When a neighboring lord, a powerful bishop, or a king's emissary arrived, the invitation to ascend the stairs was a mark of supreme distinction. While the household celebrated noisily in the great hall below, a select few would be ushered into this quiet chamber. Here, the entertainment was of a different kind entirely. Instead of a public feast, the guest might be offered a prized vintage of wine from the family's own stores, served in delicate glass cups rather than common wooden tankards. The atmosphere shifted from boisterous celebration to focused intimacy. This was the stage for the real business of power, conversations too delicate for the open hall. A marriage alliance could be proposed, the terms of a land dispute quietly negotiated, or a secret piece of political intelligence exchanged. Every word spoken here was protected by the room's very walls, safe from the gossip of servants or the ambitions of rivals. Can you sense the unspoken message in that gesture? By bringing a guest into the family's most private space, the host was demonstrating immense trust and respect. It signaled that this person was not just a public acquaintance, but a confidential ally, worthy of sharing the sanctum where the family's true plans were made. This elite social bonding, sealed with a shared drink in a quiet room, often held more weight than any grand oath sworn before a crowd. The solar, in these moments, became an engine of diplomacy, its influence radiating far beyond the single candle, illuminating the faces of those who spoke within it. Step inside this private chamber, and you entered a world of deliberate comfort, a stark contrast to the functional austerity of the great hall below. The architectural details of the solar were carefully chosen to create an environment of warmth and refinement. Its windows were the most telling feature. While the hall might have had only small, shuttered openings, the solar boasted larger windows, often positioned to catch the southern sun. In the most affluent homes, these windows were glazed with panes of glass, an almost unbelievable luxury that allowed light to flood in while keeping the cold drafts at bay. Imagine the simple wonder of sitting in a brightly lit room on a winter's day, separated from the elements by a transparent wall, a privilege known to very few. This quest for comfort extended to warmth. A dedicated fireplace, built into the wall, was a common feature. This was a revolutionary improvement over the central, smoke-filled hearth of the Great Hall. A wall fireplace drew smoke up and out through a chimney, filling the room with clean, radiant heat instead of a smoky haze. It transformed the solar from a mere room into a cozy, inviting retreat, a place where one could truly relax. The furnishings within this space were a clear declaration of status and domestic intent. The most prominent object was, of course, the great curtained bed, a piece of furniture so valuable it was often listed in wills alongside land and jewelry. But the room held other treasures. Sturdy wooden chests, carved with intricate designs and secured with iron locks, lined the walls. These held everything from the family's finest linens and clothing to those vital documents that secured their legacy. A sturdy table and a few well-made benches or chairs completed the scene. This was not the sparse, movable furniture of the hall, designed to be cleared away each night. These were permanent, solid pieces that stated this room was for lingering, for private conversation, for quiet study. Every item, from the glass in the windows to the woolen hangings on the walls, served a dual purpose. They provided physical comfort, yes, but they also visually reinforced the family's elevated position. This curated environment of light, warmth, and refined objects created a bubble of civilization high above the rustic communal life of the household. It was a physical manifestation of their wealth and their growing desire for a life that was not just powerful, but also pleasant. The name solar is a beautiful accident of history. Its true origin lies not in the sun, but in the simple old French word solar, meaning an upper room or loft. Yet medieval builders, in their practical wisdom, created a perfect alignment of meaning and function. They consistently constructed these private chambers on the southern side of the house, the aspect that received the most sunlight throughout the day. This was not a poetic choice, but a deeply practical one. In an age of drafty stone walls and limited heating, capturing every possible ray of light and warmth was essential for comfort and even health. The Great Hall, with its high ceilings and constant traffic, was notoriously difficult to heat, but the smaller, more enclosed solar, bathed in sunlight and often equipped with its own efficient fireplace, became a genuine haven of warmth. It was quite literally the brightest and most comfortable room in the entire house. So while the word itself did not mean sunroom, that is precisely what it became through intelligent design. The name solar, over time, absorbed this new, more evocative meaning. People began to associate the room directly with the solar comfort it provided, forging a link between the old word for a loft and the new experience of a sunny retreat. This was the room where you could escape the damp and the gloom, where the sun's rays could fall on a page as you read, or warm the air as you conversed with a trusted friend. It was a space defined by light, a quality as valuable as any lock on the door or chest of treasure. That locked door at the top of the stairs marked a boundary more profound than any castle wall. It separated two entirely different worlds of experience within the same household. While the Lord's family retreated to the warmth and privacy of the solar, the vast majority of the household faced a nightly reality of relentless communality. Servants, retainers, and even visiting guests of lower status typically slept right in the great hall they had worked in all day. Once the trestle tables were cleared and the final embers of the central fire glowed, they would unroll simple pallets or straw-filled mattresses directly onto the floor, still strewn with the rushes and food scraps from the evening meal. There was no personal space, no quiet corner to call one's own. Sleep was a public, often interrupted, affair, shared with the sounds of dozens of others shifting, snoring, or whispering in the dark. For those not in the hall, conditions were often worse. Many servants were relegated to drafty attics above the kitchens or to outbuildings near the animals, spaces that offered shelter but little comfort and even less security. Their entire lives were lived in the open, their few possessions kept in a small chest or simply bundled in a cloth. The solar, in its quiet luxury, was a constant, unspoken reminder of this chasm. It was a physical declaration that privacy and personal security were not universal rights, but expensive privileges reserved for the few at the very top. This architectural arrangement made the feudal hierarchy brutally clear. Your position in the household was not just about your duties or your pay. It was literally about where you were permitted to close your eyes at night. The family slept behind a locked door, elevated above the household's noise. The servants slept in the midst of it, their rest subject to the movements and moods of the community. This division went far beyond comfort. It was about control. The open, communal sleeping arrangements of the hall made it easy for the lord or his stewards to keep a casual watch over everyone, ensuring no one slipped away unnoticed or engaged in secret conversations. The ability to withdraw, to have a confidential discussion, to simply be alone with one's own thoughts, was a form of power that the servants were systematically denied. Their world was one of constant visibility, while the solar existed as a fortress of invisibility for the family. This stark contrast in living conditions, all under one roof, reveals the solar not just as a room, but as a powerful architectural symbol of the deep social divisions that defined the medieval world. It was a monument to inequality built into the very floor plan of daily life. Medieval literature holds a mirror to the solar's true purpose, reflecting its role as a stage for the most pivotal human moments. In Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, this private chamber is where the genteel prioress would have retreated, a space befitting her refined sensitivities, far from the inn's common clamor. It appears again and again in the era's romances as the setting for whispered confidences and stolen kisses, a world away from the public gaze. These fictional accounts are powerfully corroborated by the dry ink of legal documents and manorial rolls. A lord's household accounts might meticulously record a payment for glazing the solar's windows, a significant expense that proves the value placed on its light and comfort. Another entry could detail the purchase of a fine Flemish tapestry to hang upon its walls, not merely for decoration, but to block drafts and display wealth in the most intimate of settings. These were not frivolous costs. They were strategic investments in the family's private life, evidence of a conscious effort to cultivate a separate sphere of existence. The room you read about in a story and the room paid for in an account book are one and the same, a testament to how deeply the need for a sanctuary had embedded itself in the medieval mind. Yet this concept of a private family chamber was not confined by a single name or a rigid design. As the idea of the solar room spread across Europe, it was reshaped by local stone, local threats, and local tongues. In the rolling countryside of England, the solar became a standard feature of the manor house, a predictable and essential component of a gentleman's home. Just across the channel in France, you would find a room serving the same essential purpose, but it was more often called the chamber, a word that simply means room. Yet in this context, it meant the room, the private bedchamber and retreat for the noble family. The name was different, but the human need it answered was identical. Now, travel north to the turbulent Scottish borders, where raiding parties were a constant threat. Here, the need for security dramatically altered the solar's form. It was frequently built as part of a sturdy tower house, a vertical fortress of stone. In these structures, the family's private chambers were stacked high above the ground, often accessible only by a narrow, defensible staircase. This was not just a room for privacy, it was a final redoubt, a stronghold within a stronghold where the laird and his family could make a last stand if the lower floors were breached. The variations are a fascinating puzzle. A lord in sunny Provence might orient his chamber to catch a cool breeze, while a German knight in a dense forest castle might prioritize its placement for maximum defensibility over sunlight. These regional adaptations prove a profound point. The solar was not a passing architectural fad. It was a fundamental solution to a universal desire for security, status, and a space to simply be a family. A solution that was brilliantly customized to meet the demands of every local landscape. But the solar's role stretched far beyond the family's private life. This quiet chamber doubled as the administrative heart of the entire estate. While the Great Hall was the stage for public displays of power, the solar was the engine room where that power was managed. Here, in the calm above the storm, the lord would meet with his steward, the man responsible for the day-to-day operations of the manor. Spread across the sturdy table between them would be rolls of parchment detailing the harvest yields from every field, records of rents owed by tenants, and inventories of livestock. This was not a place for grand speeches, but for focused, confidential calculation. A decision to purchase a new plow horse, a dispute over land boundaries between two farmers, or a strategy for storing grain against a poor harvest. These were the matters settled in the solar's quiet. The lord might dictate a letter to a neighboring landowner or a petition to the king. His words captured by a scribe in the secure knowledge they would not be overheard and twisted into gossip. This separation was crucial. In the hall, every conversation was public property, susceptible to misinterpretation or deliberate sabotage. In the solar, business could be conducted with a clarity and discretion that was simply impossible downstairs. The efficiency gained in this private office was immense. Freed from the constant interruptions of the household, a morning's work in the solar could accomplish what might take a distracted day in the hall. The very peace of the room, a luxury in itself, became a tool for better governance, ensuring the decisions that fed and clothed hundreds of people were made with a clear head and a protected tongue. Within the solar's protective walls, the most vulnerable members of the noble household found their sanctuary. This private chamber was not just a retreat for the lord and lady, it was the nursery for their heirs, a carefully controlled environment for the earliest years of life. While older children were often sent away to other noble houses for their education and social training, the infants and toddlers remained here, in the very heart of the family's private world. They slept in smaller beds or cradles placed near the great curtained bed of their parents, or under the watchful eye of a trusted nurse who might also share the room. This arrangement was deeply practical. The solar offered a level of safety and cleanliness impossible to maintain in the chaotic, rush-strewn, and often crowded Great Hall. A toddler could not easily tumble into a central fire or be stepped on by a servant in a room designed for quiet and order. The air was cleaner, free from the constant smoke and drafts of the larger space below. This was about more than simple comfort, it was a profound investment in the future. The survival of a healthy heir was the single most important concern for any noble family, the key to continuing their lineage and securing their lands. By sheltering their young children in this secluded, well-appointed room, parents were actively protecting their most precious assets. Can you hear the difference in sound? Instead of the boisterous shouts from the hall, the solar would have echoed with the soft lullabies of a nurse or the gentle instructions of a mother teaching a child its first words. This was where the foundations of noble identity were laid, not through formal lessons, but through the intimate, daily absorption of family manners and whispered stories of ancestry. The solar, therefore, served as the cradle of dynasty, a space where the next generation was nurtured within the safest, most controlled environment the medieval world could provide. The Great Hall's central hearth was a spectacular source of heat, but it was also a storm of smoke and ash. Up in the solar, a quiet revolution in comfort was taking place. This private chamber was often among the very first in the house to be equipped with a built-in fireplace and a proper chimney. This was not just an upgrade, it was a fundamental reimagining of how to live. Instead of a fire in the middle of the room, with smoke lazily curling up to a hole in the roof, the solar's fire was contained within a stone structure in the wall. A clever flue actively pulled the smoke up and out, channeling the discomfort away. Can you imagine the difference that made? The air in the solar remained clear. The walls and the fine woolen hangings did not slowly accumulate a layer of soot. A conversation could be held without coughing, and the warmth that filled the room was radiant and clean, not a smoky haze that stung the eyes. This single innovation transformed the solar from a mere room into a genuine refuge of warmth and health. It marked a pivotal shift in thinking, a move away from enduring the elements to actively controlling them. For the elite family, the desire for privacy was now inseparable from the pursuit of physical comfort. Their sanctuary was not only quiet and secure, but it was also the warmest and most breathable space in their entire world. This commitment to specialized comfort for a single room reveals how deeply the value of a private life had taken root, a luxury built directly into the stone and mortar of their home. That quiet chamber high above the hall did not vanish with the Middle Ages. It simply changed its name and multiplied. The solar is the direct ancestor of a room you might find in any grand English home centuries later, the withdrawing room. The name says it all, a room to withdraw to. Just as the lord and lady withdrew from the great hall to their solar, Tudor families and their guests would finish a meal in the main chamber, and then withdraw to a more intimate, comfortable space for private conversation, music, or games. This was the natural evolution of that original impulse for separation. As wealth grew and the feudal household's rigid structure softened, the single solar was no longer enough. Its functions began to splinter and expand. Why have just one private room when you could have several? The all-in-one solar gave way to a suite of specialized chambers. One room might be reserved solely for sleeping, becoming the bedchamber. Another, often called a closet or a cabinet, served as a tiny, intensely private study for the master of the house. A third would become the true withdrawing room, a parlor for socializing away from the formal dining area. Each of these new rooms was a direct descendant of that original upstairs sanctuary, each taking on a piece of the solar's old role. This architectural branching out marks a crucial point in the history of the home. We are witnessing the slow-motion explosion of the Great Hall. The single, multipurpose space that defined medieval life was gradually being dismantled, its functions farmed out to a series of dedicated, private rooms. The Great Hall itself shrank in importance, often becoming a grand but infrequently used entrance hall, while daily life retreated into this new network of specialized chambers. Understanding the humble solar allows us to trace this incredible journey. It shows us that our modern homes, with their separate living rooms, dining rooms, and bedrooms, are the end result of a centuries-long quest that began when one family decided to build a simple room at the top of a staircase, a room where they could finally close the door on the world. The solar's locked door signaled the slow fading of the Great Hall's roar. That vast communal space, once the undeniable heart of every home, began to lose its daily purpose as the private chamber above it grew in comfort and importance. Why gather for every meal and moment in a smoky, crowded hall when the family could retreat to the quiet warmth of their own apartment? The hall did not vanish, but its role fundamentally shifted. It transformed from the household's living room into its banquet hall, a space reserved for special occasions, formal feasts, and displays of power meant for a wide audience. Daily life, with its private conversations, confidential business, and simple family meals, steadily migrated upstairs. This was more than an architectural trend. It was a social revolution etched in stone and timber. The very structure of the home was adapting to a new reality, one where the bonds of feudal loyalty were loosening. The lord's authority was becoming less about his constant physical presence among his people, and more about the managed, distant power he exercised from his private chamber. The household was no longer a single, undivided community, but a collection of distinct spheres, with the family's private world slowly pulling away from the public one. Can you feel the quiet power of that withdrawal? The decision to build a room for privacy ultimately helped dismantle the world of relentless communality that had defined life for centuries. But the solar's story is clouded by modern myths that soften its hard edges. We often picture it as a perpetual sunroom, a place where noble ladies idly bathed in light, but this is a romantic fantasy. The solar was not a medieval solarium designed for leisure sunbathing. Its association with light was a practical benefit of its southern placement, not its primary purpose. Nor was it an isolated building, a separate cottage for the family. It was fundamentally an integrated part of the main house, a deliberate withdrawal within the home's structure, not a flight from it. Perhaps the most persistent misconception is that this was an exclusively feminine space, a kind of early sewing room. While the lady's authority within the solar was immense, the room itself was a shared command center. The Lord conducted his private estate business here, met with his most trusted advisors, and secured his most valuable possessions. It was the private apartment for the ruling couple, a space where their spheres of domestic and administrative power seamlessly merge. Understanding these clarifications strips away the anachronistic glamour. It reveals the solar not as a poetic retreat, but as a hardworking, multifunctional nerve center. This was where the complex social machinery of an elite household was quietly managed, far from the public performance of the hall below. The silent stones of ruined manor houses hold the final confirmation of the solar's story. Archaeology brushes away the soil of centuries to reveal the ghostly blueprints of these private chambers. Excavations uncover the foundational footprints of upper rooms, distinct from the vast open space of the great hall below. The subtle remains of a stone staircase, often tucked into a corner of the building, show the deliberate path of ascent the family would have taken. We can see where the hearth for a private fireplace was set into the wall, a clear upgrade from a central fire. The post holes and sill beams left in the earth tell us the exact dimensions of the room, proving it was a substantial, purpose-built space, not an afterthought. Even the placement of windows is preserved in the crumbling masonry, confirming that these chambers were consistently positioned on the sunnier, southern side of the house for light and warmth. This physical evidence transforms historical records into tangible reality, but to truly understand the solar's atmosphere, you need to step inside one. Living history museums like the Weald and Downland Living Museum in England have performed a kind of architectural magic. Using traditional tools and techniques, they have reconstructed entire medieval buildings, complete with authentic solar rooms. Walking across the worn wooden floorboards and feeling the cool draft from a leaded glass window, you grasp the room's intimate scale. You can see how the light from that southern window falls across a heavy oak table and feel the radiant heat from a working fireplace, a world away from the smoky hall below. The low ceiling, the thick walls, the simple yet sturdy furniture, it all coalesces into a powerful, sensory experience. The historical documents tell us what the room was for, but the reconstruction lets us feel what it was like to stand within its quiet walls, finally understanding it not as a concept, but as a place. That quiet chamber at the top of the stairs never truly disappeared. Its core idea, the need for a private family sanctuary separate from the household's bustle, is alive and well in the modern master suite. Think about the layout of a typical house today. The main bedroom is almost always positioned for privacy, often at the end of a hallway or on its own floor, a direct echo of the solar's placement away from the Great Hall. This is not a random architectural choice. It is the culmination of a centuries-long evolution of the same human desires that drove a medieval lord to build his upstairs retreat. We still seek a space that is exclusively ours, a room where we can close the door on the demands of work, the noise of children, and the constant connectivity of modern life. In our master suites, we have recreated the solar's fundamental promise, a guaranteed retreat for sleep, intimacy, and quiet reflection. The features we now consider standard are the direct descendants of the solar's most prized comforts. That in-suite bathroom, with its lockable door, is the modern equivalent of the solar's privacy, offering a level of personal seclusion that would have been unimaginable in the communal Great Hall. The walk-in closet is the successor to those heavy, locked chests that line the solar's walls, a dedicated and secure space for our personal treasures and garments. Even the modern trend for a reading nook or a cozy sitting area within the bedroom fulfills the same need the solar did for a space dedicated not just to sleep, but to peaceful, solitary leisure. Can you see the ghost of the solar in your own home? That desire to withdraw at the end of the day, to have a room that serves as your personal command center and sanctuary, is a need that transcends time. It connects us directly to those medieval families who first carved out a space of their own, proving that the architecture of privacy is a permanent feature of the human story. The first light of dawn would filter through the glazed windows, long before the shouts from the courtyard below broke the silence. Inside the solar, the day began not with a trumpet's call, but with the soft rustle of heavy bed curtains being drawn back. The lord and lady rose from the fortress of their great bed, stepping onto woven rushes scattered with sweet-smelling herbs. Their first moments of consciousness were not spent in a crowded room, but in a private space that belonged only to them. The lady's first task might be to check the locked chests, running her hands over the fine linens stored within to ensure no dampness had settled in the night. The scent of cedar and lavender would rise from the open lids, a small, personal luxury of order and care. Meanwhile, the lord would already be unrolling a parchment, his steward admitted for a hushed morning council. Their voices were low, discussing the yield from the north fields or a tenant's dispute, the words confidential and clear in the quiet room. This was the solar at its most practical, a secure office where the business of lordship could begin without an audience. By midday, the character of the room would shift. The sun, now high in the sky, would pour through the south-facing windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the warm air. The steward would be gone, and the administrative bustle would give way to quieter pursuits. The lady might settle on a bench near the brightest window, her needle flashing as she worked on an intricate embroidery. This was not merely a pastime, but a display of skill and piety, each stitch reinforcing the family's refinement. Across the room, the lord might sit at the heavy oak table, slowly reading from a precious book of hours. The only sounds would be the crackle of the fireplace, the gentle pull of thread through linen, and the soft turning of a vellum page. Here, in the heart of the day, the solar became a refuge for cultivated leisure, a stark contrast to the physical labor and noisy industry unfolding outside its walls. Can you feel the profound peace of that afternoon sun, a peace earned by the simple ability to close a door? As evening drew in and the great hall below erupted into the clamor of the main household meal, the solar prepared for its final, most intimate act. The lord and lady would have already performed their public duty, presiding over the high table for the feast, but their true evening was just beginning. Once the ceremonial eating was done, they would ascend the stairs, perhaps accompanied by a single, honored guest. The heavy door would close, muting the roar of laughter and song from below. In this cocoon of privacy, the mood transformed. A servant would pour wine from a silver pitcher into glass cups, a rare delicacy reserved for such confidential gatherings. The conversation here was not for public consumption. It might involve a proposed marriage for their daughter, a delicate political alliance, or simply the easy, unguarded talk of trusted friends. This was where real bonds were forged, far from the performative camaraderie of the hall. Finally, the guest would depart. The door would be barred from the inside, and the room would return to its two inhabitants. The curtains around the great bed would be drawn once more, creating that final, ultimate sanctuary within a sanctuary. The entire cycle of their private life, from dawn's first business to midnight's deepest rest, had unfolded within these four walls, a complete world suspended high above the chaos they ruled. The medieval solar room was a quiet revolution built in wood and stone. It was far more than just an extra chamber. It was a powerful statement about the changing human desire for a life beyond public view. This single room wove together the threads of privacy, status, family, and comfort into a new kind of domestic experience. For the lord, it served as a private office where confidential business shaped the fate of the estate. For the lady, it was a command center from which she managed the household's intricate operations. As a secure bedchamber, it offered a sanctuary for rest and family intimacy. And as a venue for elite entertaining, it became a stage for forging the alliances that secured power. The solar was, in every sense, the beating heart of private medieval life. Its story is a vital chapter in the long history of how we live, a reminder that the yearning for a room of one's own is a deeply rooted human impulse that has shaped our homes for centuries.